Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Tuesday everybody. Yesterday's video was a big episode on the economy, so for today we will chiefly touch on other developments before ending briefly on the economy again. First up for today, let's move through updates related to China's opening up and massive COVID wave. The large first wave of infections, likely in the hundreds of millions now, continues to wash over the country. Several of China's metropolitan cities, including Beijing and Shanghai, where surges started early, are now expected to be past their peaks, with the situation beginning to ease in the coming days. However, most of the rest of the country, which is also less well-resourced, is, to varying degrees, still at the beginning of their curve. Last week, the state-sponsored medical journal Frontiers of Medicine published research warning that central and western Chinese provinces and rural areas will be hit hard by a wave of infections in mid to late January, and will fare worse than the wealthy coastal cities have. The true test will come as migrant workers returning home for Chinese New Year, also called Spring Festival, bring the virus to many of these poorer rural areas. Even Chinese state media acknowledges this. Quote, "Of particular concern is the lack of healthcare resources in rural areas and small and medium-sized cities in China, as well as the large number of the elderly and people with underlying diseases. The flow of urban and rural populations during the Spring Festival migration will also greatly influence the course of the epidemic." End quote. Officials are vocally concerned as well. Quote, "What we are most worried about is that it's been 3 years and people haven't gone home to spend the new year. There could be a retaliatory rush of people from the cities to the countryside." End quote. The China-focused outlet Sixth Tone writes this week that the quality of healthcare in rural China, quote, "pales in comparison to that of urban areas." End quote. Many places already suffer from a serious shortage of drugs and critical equipment. According to a report on a township of more than 30,000 people in the central Henan province, the outlet writes, when cases reached their peak with more than 300 people seeking medical assistance per day, the health center only had 5 boxes of ibuprofen. But, despite these reports, production is increasing. Chinese financial media outlet Yicai reports today that China's production of ibuprofen and paracetamol has increased more than 600% since the start of December to 190 million tablets a day. The recent severe shortages of drugs in major cities is expected to ease in the coming weeks. In terms of how many deaths China has seen to date, we have no reliable information, but it is certain to be much higher than the official numbers would suggest. The reports and images of bodies piled up at crowded and in some cases makeshift morgues also suggests no small amount. The Shanghai municipal government was forced on Sunday to deny rumors that funeral parlors in the city were cremating 2 or more corpses in one incinerator at a time. Meanwhile, more countries, like Australia and Canada, have followed Japan, the United States, Italy, Taiwan, and others in imposing soft restrictions like compulsory testing on inbound PRC travelers. The concern being that there is insignificant surveillance, too many blind spots on the ground in China as China weathers this massive first COVID wave. Next up, last week on December 30th, General Secretary Xi Jinping had a video call with Russian leader Vladimir Putin. The readouts from both sides trumpeted the close relationship between the two leaders and the two countries, with Xi himself expressing, quote, "China stands ready to join hands with Russia and all other progressive forces around the world who oppose hegemony and power politics, to reject any unilateralism, protectionism and bullying, firmly safeguard the sovereignty, security and development interests of the two countries, and uphold international fairness and justice." End quote. Some analysts have warned against wishful thinking in Europe that perhaps China is distancing itself from Putin. Quote, "It's understandable why many want to hope that China will either restrain Putin on Ukraine or will distance itself from Russia, thus limiting flows of money into the Kremlin's war chest. Both hopes are not supported by data and are rather in the territory of magical thinking." End quote. We have a little more on the China-Russia relationship, as well as other key relationships in the next part on Chinese diplomacy. Hey guys, if you're enjoying the episode, don't forget to hit that like button, and for those who have not subscribed and you're enjoying this sort of content, maybe consider subscribing, hit that bell notification, and you'll be on top of these updates as soon as they are released. And as always, anyone who wants to go that extra mile and join the community of subscribers that keep this channel sustainable, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. This is what allows me to continue making these episodes every day. As always, thank you so much everybody for the ongoing support. Wang Yi is now officially the Director of the General Office of the Central Foreign Affairs Commission, the PRC's foreign policy top job. In the first issue of 2023 of 九事, Seeking Truth, the leading party ideological publication, Wang Yi penned an article on, quote, a journey of major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics. End quote. The ideas that were in this article are very similar to a speech he presented on Christmas Day at the so-called Symposium on the International Situation in China's Foreign Relations. It is worth briefly looking at some of the content of the article and the speech, as it signals what we should expect from Chinese diplomacy in 2023. Quote, we have firmly rejected the United States' erroneous China policy and have been exploring the right way for the two countries to get along with each other, as the United States has stubbornly continued to see China as its primary competitor and engage in blatant blockade, suppression, and provocation against China. China-US relations were plunged into serious difficulty. We have deepened good neighborliness, friendship, and cooperation with Russia, and made the China-Russia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership of Coordination more mature and resilient. As some country is seeking to revive the Cold War mentality and fabricating the false narrative of democracy versus authoritarianism, China and Russia have stood in solidarity with other countries to steadfastly push for multipolarity and greater democracy in international relations, and steadfastly oppose hegemony and reject a new Cold War. We will stay committed to dialogue between civilizations. We will stay committed to our fighting spirit, which is the purpose of upholding principles and promoting justice. China's core interests must not be undermined. Its sovereignty and territorial integrity must not be infringed upon. And the cause of the rejuvenation of the Chinese race must not be disrupted. We will build a stronger line of defense to protect our national interests. We will focus on strengthening our international communication capacity and make our voice heard, loud and clear. End quote. Reading this, we should anticipate Beijing's assertive diplomacy to continue in 2023. Okay, and finally for today, I wanted to end today's video with observations from Peking University finance professor Michael Pettis, our old friend, who made comments today related to our theme from yesterday's video, that is, looking forward to the economy in 2023. Pettis's comments can act as a supplement to yesterday's content. Quote, for me, the key question is not how much of a rebound in 2023 GDP growth there will be, but rather how much of the rebound will be driven by healthy domestic demand, i.e. consumption and business investment, and how sustainable that demand will be. Pettis argues that with enough spending on infrastructure and property development, China can get as much GDP growth as Beijing likes, but this kind of growth will simply be reversed in future periods as the economic benefits of the spending fails to match the costs. Analysts must stop interpreting Chinese economic data in the same way they interpret data from other countries, he says. In China, where so much growth is driven by soft budget spending, GDP does not mean what it means abroad, where most spending is limited by hard budget constraints. Quote, what matters in China, in other words, is not the quantity of GDP growth, but rather its quality, and this will be driven mainly by the extent to which Beijing is able to direct resources to households instead of to businesses and local governments, as it has for decades. Whether or not Beijing takes steps to shift permanently the structure of domestic demand is what will really determine whether or not 2023 is a good year economically and, more importantly, how costly China's longer-term adjustment is likely to be. End quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I will see you all tomorrow.